So today is the 10th day of the Carbon Lehigh's 12 Days of Learning series, and we are so happy that you joined us. Today we're going to be sharing a little bit about the importance of using story sequencing as a comprehension building tool, and we'll provide you with a few activities that you can use in your classroom to support story sequencing.
Hello and welcome. My name is Kristen Adams, and I'm thrilled to be here with Emily as we present to you some ideas for sequencing.
Sequencing is one of the many skills that contributes to students' ability to comprehend what they read. Sequencing refers to the identification of the components of a story, the beginning, middle, and end, and also to the ability to retell the events within a given text in the order in which they occurred. The ability to sequence events in a text is a key comprehension strategy, especially for narrative texts. Sequencing is also an important component of problem solving across subjects.
So why teach sequencing? There's a few reasons that are critical for helping students. One, it assists with comprehension, especially for narrative text. Sequencing helps students organize information and ideas in an efficient way. As Emily said, by helping students provide that structure of beginning, middle, and end is one way that we can sequence, and it helps students to think through the text that they are reading. Sequencing is also a component of problem solving, and it can be used across curriculum. So think about the activities that you're using in your classroom that you could integrate sequencing ideas, whether it be in science or social studies.
Story maps provide one way to help students organize the events from a story. So in this slide, we're going to look at some graphic organizers and talk about how we can use them to help our students sequence. And I'm going to show those to you in just a second. Another helpful tool for teaching sequencing is having your students learn those transition or signal words that indicate a sequence. So the words first, second, and last would be good words, or next, therefore, all those words. And I have linked a list of all those transition words, which I'll show you also in a minute. Another good tool would be sequencing sticks, story chains, or storytelling ropes. These are tools that can help us help our students practice ordering events within a story. And we do have some examples for you here. Each of these is a link to bring you to the graphic organizers. So I'll show that to you really quickly. This is a link, let's see here, this up a little bit, to a Reading Rockets website that includes many graphic organizers and story maps that can help you when you are sequencing with your students. We have a couple.
So as we transition, there's a couple other activities that would could be useful. And we're going to give you the bit.ly address that will link all of these graphic organizers to you. And you can access them at a later time. We have linked them all there. And the same thing when it comes to the activities slide. But I want you to think through all of the activities you're doing that are probably holiday related or winter related as we transition into this season. Anytime you're using an arts and craft activity, it is a great time to help students start to understand the steps and processes that occur when you're crafting. What are you doing first, next, finally? You can have students sequence as you go along. You could have them write their own directions, or you could have them teach a student in your class how to make that. When you're doing that, you're allowing your students to put things in order and to think critically through the steps that you have. Maybe you even give them an arts and craft activity and you leave out a step and you ask them, what step is missing? Those are all great examples to use when doing arts and crafts. There is a link in this presentation that will take you to a whole host of different arts and crafts activities, but I know that you probably have a ton that you use in your classroom. So start to think through some of those activities you already use and either create some type of directions with your students or give them the steps in an order and they're scrambled and they have to put them in order. Those are all great ways to practice. If you're doing any type of cooking, there's a lot of great activities you can do for cooking. I know one of my favorites that I used in my classroom was the applesauce and cinnamon ornaments that you dry because it requires no baking and the kids just love it, makes your whole classroom smell great as well. And when you're cooking, you're allowing students to see the process, the sequence in which we do these activities. Throughout our entire life, we're using activities that require us to use specific steps. And part of that is allowing them those hands-on experiences to try that. Whether you're using a wordless book and you're taking out the words and having students take those words that are in and put them back in, or maybe just having them retell that story, having them see that order and letting them see the power of their words when we start to put things in an order that makes sense. There are all types of everyday activities you can use as well. Whether you create a sequence page for simple activities around your house or around your school, there's all different ways. For calendar, you can write on popsicle sticks the days of the week, depending on the level that you have, and they can sequence them in order. You could have them the months of the year. There's all different things you can do when we talk about calendar, because when we're talking about calendar, we're helping students create a way for them to put things in order. And the last one that's there, and the address will be linked for you, is a sequencing game. It's just a cute little online game that you could link to your Google Classroom or put it in a spot for students to access that allows them to see the way that we sequence and how what we do in sequencing is a critical step to understanding and providing comprehension.
The next couple of slides are links to videos of stories being read aloud that you can share with your students. I have vetted each of these videos to make sure they are appropriate for the classroom, and they are, so they should be safe and ready to go. And then after each of the stories, I have provided links for you to do a drag and drop sequencing activity with your students. If you aren't familiar, I'm going to show you now. If you aren't familiar with the drag and drop option in Google Slides, it's a really powerful tool that you can use for many, many activities, not just sequencing. Basically where you are creating the background image as a graphic organizer, and then you use text boxes that you can drag into your graphic organizer that you have made. So as you can see, after we've watched the mitten, I've broken down the story. It says, let's retell the story of the mitten. And you would say, you know, what happened first? Oh, the boy Nicky wanted his grandma to make him white mittens. She wasn't so sure, but she did. That is the first step. It's also just so happens to be the first box. And I would just take it and I drag it over. And then there it is. And so this is an activity that you can do with your students. They could put all of these back in order. It's something you could do on your whiteboard or your smartboard. It's also something that you could share with your students, and you could force them to make a copy, and then they could do it on their own in Google, which would work on pretty much any laptop or iPad. So if you are unfamiliar with forcing your students to make a copy of a slide, so if you decide that you want to use these activities and you want to give each student a copy of this, you know, graphic organizer drag and drop activity, in the Google Suite, up in the top bar, after the slash that typically says edit, you erase edit and you type in copy. And that forces each student to make a copy. And if you need any help with any of that, Kristen and I are always happy to help you. Here's just a blank drag and drop activity for you to have kind of in your toolbox for sequencing. The next one is similar. It's the snowy day read aloud. I've watched the entire thing. It is safe for your students, no surprises. And another drag and drop activity where you can either send this out to your students or you can do it together through Zoom. You could share your screen. And so you would read, what happened first? Oh, the boy woke up, he looked outside, there was snow, he got dressed and went out to play. And you would take this text box and you would say, that's what happened first, and just show your students. And then you could ask them to work independently, or you could read each of the boxes aloud to them, or you could have them do this on their own. And then again, I've shared the blank copy with you so that you can create other activities if you want to. And then the last story is another really cute, well-read, kind of wintertime snowy story that you could use to sequence events. It's a little bit longer. I believe it's 15 or 17 minutes long. And I was thinking with this one, you could create a drag and drop activity, or you could use Padlet. If you're familiar with Padlet, it's a great tool. It's sort of like an online bulletin board, and you could assign different parts to each of your students, and you could have everybody, make an illustration of their part or write a little summary of their part. And then everybody could post them on Padlet, and together you could drag them into back into order so you could sequence them together. So another cute story for you to use if you don't want to spend the time watching all these books being read aloud to make sure that they are safe for school. I've done that work for you.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to differentiate some of the sequencing activity, and we're going to use a really basic example just so that you could see. So when you're thinking about your students, you need to start thinking through the different groupings that you have in your class, which I know you have considered, but this is an activity that would work as well for your second language learners because it's a visual activity and it's a great way to take what you're using and then tailor it to what they already know. So as you can see, this is a similar to what Emily was talking about with a drag and drop. So you could have the students drag and drop each of the different pictures and put them in order and then number them, the first, the second, the third, the fourth. You could have students that are above grade level that can actually write about what's happening in the beginning of the story and who are the main characters, where did that story take place. As you can see for the next example, I took out one of the images. So you could do that as well. You could say, you know what, I have a student who is just starting to understand how to sequence, and I'm going to take out one of the images to simplify it for them. Those are the main three parts. We don't need the snowman all decorated. That could be something that you could even have them extend if they've mastered that concept. When you click to the next slide, you can see how you could give students part of the information and allow them to draw a picture or make meaning in the empty boxes. So there's many ways that you could take the same original slide and then alter a few pieces or add things to it or take things away to allow for students to create meaning. That's a great way to just differentiate for all the different learners that you have in your classroom. So those were a few ideas that we had in terms of sequencing. There is a whole host of activities out there. So we encourage you to continue to keep learning and growing like I know you are. The bit.ly address for today's presentation, if you go to bit.ly/12 days, a capital S for sequencing, you could find links to our presentation as well as all of the things that we showed you today. We hope you use this slide deck as a resource, and feel free to contact either Emily or myself at the Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit. We included our email in the beginning of our presentation. We would love to assist you however you would need that in your classroom and support you with your sequencing and other ideas. So thank you so much for joining us today.